Okay, great. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the seventh weekly Good is the New Cool / Conspiracy of Love webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Afdal Aziz. I'm here in Venice Beach in Los Angeles, and I'm joined by my co-host and good friend and partner in purpose, Bobby Jones in New York City. What's up, Bobby?
What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining.
Before we dive into introducing our amazing panel of guests today, we just want to say a few thank yous to people who have been with this webinar since the very inception. We could not have done this alone. First of all, special thanks to Lucia, who is in Prague and who is the engine who keeps everything running behind the scenes. Thank you so much, Lucia. We also want to say thank you to Mark Sperling, who's been from Group Y, who's been a part of this, giving us his wise counsel as to how the hell to do a weekly webinar and do all the complicated stuff. Thank you, Mark. And last but not least, Nadia Larinci, who is our third partner in Conspiracy of Love out in Europe, where her weekend is beginning. Thank you, Nadia, for being such a rock and helping all of us as well. So for those of you who joined before, welcome back. For people joining for the first time, here's what we're going to do. We have about an hour where we're going to have 3 different conversations with folks that we think are doing really inspiring, innovative work to fight COVID-19 and to help us understand how brands can get involved in this fight as well. We're going to do a Q&A with them at the end. So please save your questions, submit them via the Q&A function at the bottom there. And then Bobby will be monitoring it right throughout. And then we'll save 15 minutes at the end for those questions. This whole thing will be uploaded to YouTube directly after. We will send you a link to this recording, and we will also send you a Dropbox link to the 2 presentations you're going to see here today. And so you can kind of have them at your leisure afterwards as well. All right, enough housekeeping. Let me start with introducing my guests. So first up, we have Megan Rokosh from Havas Health. Megan is the CMO there. Hi, Megan.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having us. Megan's joining us from New York. Actually, I think all of our guests are joining us from New York. Next up, we have Laura from Purpose. Hi, Laura.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Purpose is an amazing agency that deals with, guess what, purpose. And Laura's here to talk us through some of the insights and frameworks these guys use to help brands think about how to behave in the time of COVID-19. And then last but not least, we have Andrew Royce from Voice. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, how are you?
Nice I should say buenos dias, Andrew, or guten Tag, Andrew, or any of the 220 languages that Voice provides. Voice is an amazing on-demand translation platform. Anyone in the world, anywhere, can pick up the app and be connected to somebody who speaks the language, who can then translate on their behalf. Voice made headlines last week when they donated 100,000 free minutes to medical workers and frontline workers who are battling COVID-19. Thank you very much for that generous gesture, Andrew. And today we're going to talk a little bit about his journey and how Voice can work with other brands as well. So welcome, Andrew.
No, I appreciate you having me on, and the donation was just to find our way to contribute during this crisis. And the biggest heroes are the healthcare providers in the front lines. So we're just trying to find a way to help them and
absolutely
help their lives a little bit easier. And we even translate Latin. So if anyone remembers the Latin from
the Latin's going to come in all real useful, really old medical textbooks when you're like, what is this body part? All right. So stick around for Andrew. We're going to have a really stimulating discussion. But first, I'm going to hand over to Bobby to introduce Megan and let you guys take off the first segment from there. Bobby, go ahead.
All right, Megan, thanks for joining us. So as Afdal mentioned, Megan is the global CMO for Havas Health. And Megan, you've been doing some really interesting work in looking at how COVID-19 is affecting the way that people around the world are prioritizing their health. And it sounds like from some of the research that you've done that there are going to be some shifting expectations in terms of what people are going to expect from the brands and the places where they go and all the different ways they live their life. That's going to have some significant new expectations for the companies and brands that they are part of. So I'd love for you to share all of the great research you've been doing and what you're learning about what brands need to know in this post-COVID reality that we'll be in.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And thank you guys so much for joining us today. I know this is an absolutely wild time, so I just want to start with, compassion for everybody who's navigating craziness in their personal and professional lives. And thank you so much to you guys for spearheading these conversations, because I think the thing we need to do right now is share knowledge as much as possible. So I'm happy to share with you guys my point of view today, and hopefully this offers you a little bit of help in as you're making decisions for your brand, your organizations over the next foreseeable future. So I'm just going to jump into some slides here. I named this presentation, Your Brand is Now a Health Brand. And Bobby and I had a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago, which sort of led to this discussion. So we have the good fortune, we're the largest health and wellness company in the world. So we work with all of the major pharmaceutical, life sciences, biosciences, et cetera. And health and wellness has been an explosive category over the last probably 20 or 30 years in particular. So we've seen, double digit, sometimes triple digit year-over-year growth. And so consumer expectations have been changing for a long time. But what's happened with COVID-19 is we've expedited this wild transition of consumer expectation, and people are seeing the world now through a lens that is totally different. So I want to share some slides with you guys just to sort of remind us what has happened over the last little while. So this is a pre-COVID grocery store. Any day in any major city. I took this picture in New York. This is a Trader Joe's on any sort of random Thursday or Friday evening post-work. So the next photo is a grocery store, May 2020. Now, when you look at the stark contrast between these two things, it's a reminder that, everybody's calling this the new normal or next normal. It's a reminder of how much we have actually changed in the last few months. So these things have become normal for us, where we're wearing masks, we're wearing gloves, we understand virus transmission and things like that we have never previously thought about in our lifetimes. So whatever that word you want it to be happened. This has been a crazy time. And so as threat of illness has become a fear for people, much of the world that we see around us has become a potential threat. So we've seen the simple of actions become almost sanctified, going to the grocery store. They become events for us. Our homes have become sanctuaries. There's socially distanced walks, there's Zoom meetings day in and day out, there's virtual happy hours and thoughts about ways we go to the grocery store. So we're experiencing a couple of things at one time. One is this global pandemic, which has totally shifted consumer point of view. And the second thing is one of the biggest digital migrations in known history. So we will likely never be the same after this. So my biggest point that I'd like to share with all of you guys today is, and Bobby and I talked about this, the idea of pressing pause on your business plans and then pressing play on the same plan that you had a few months ago is not a reality anymore. And that's not to be pessimistic, but it's rather to be optimistic. We have an incredible opportunity in front of us. And I want to share some information from the work that we do in the health and wellness space that I feel could help you guys as you're making decisions. So what does this mean for brands? Number one, your operations have changed or they'll change in the future. So if you have any sort of physical presence, you're probably rethinking that right now. Your supply chain may have been disrupted. Think of fitness from cinemas to restaurants, et cetera. You'll need to find new ways likely to generate revenue. So we've seen this digital migration, and a lot of companies have followed business practices where consumers are going. So if you think about where they are right now, most of them are at home. And in the future, when they leave their homes and we have this migration back to the physical world, we need to be thinking about what that's going to look like. And so the revenue that you generated with your skills that you had in the past might not apply in the same way as you look forward. Many companies are hiring medical professionals. So chief medical officers, we appointed one just a couple of weeks ago. This obsession with the need to understand the health and well-being of both your consumers as well as the people that work for your companies will continue in the foreseeable. Lots of retail companies are hiring epidemiologists who are experts in the spread of viruses. And, you know, if you're not thinking about this yet, you should start to think about this, because this will be an expectation for brands as consumers look to brands to set different health standards across their practices moving forward. And lastly, and perhaps the most important, is you're going to be communicating with people who are seeing the world through a completely different lens. So just a few months ago, you know, we weren't nervous to shake hands, and we weren't nervous about the grocery store or sitting too close to someone or fearing spread. And now our relationship with the physical world has changed completely. Our relationship with human contact has changed completely. So as you think about your plans for the future, these are things that you need to be considering. So the way that I interpret all of this is these are things in the health space that we think about all the time. So you are now a health brand. People will have an expectation moving forward that brands will have a point of view on health and wellness, that they'll be considering health and wellness in terms of how people are engaging with them. And they'll be asking themselves a series of questions. So they're categorizing the world right now as safe and unsafe, or, you know, threatening and non-threatening. And they'll be asking in the future, can I trust you? Are you a company that will add or subtract, you know, from my health or to my health? Are you good for me and for my family? Do you pose a risk to me and my family? Do you pose a benefit? And do you care about the same things that I care about? So it's interesting because as a restaurant chain or a cinema or a shoe brand, in the past, you may have never had to think about any of these things. And now you'll be entering into a world where people are seeing products and experiences and physical spaces in a completely different way. And so you need to start to develop a point of view for how you share how you're going to add to this health ecosystem for your customers moving forward. So we work with huge health brands, and there's some things that I felt that I could communicate with you guys that might help dictate the ways that you're thinking about some of these things. So health brands lead with a message about how they're contributing to well-being. And I think there is massive opportunity for this in the future. And, you know, Bobby talked about some of the experimental work that we do. We work a lot with Universal Music Group on the idea of how music can help well-being. So this notion can really permeate into any category. If you're a travel company, why are vacations good for health and well-being? If you're an artist or a musician, why is art and music good for health? If you're in the fitness business, why is this important for people to consider as they're prioritizing their health more than ever? Health brands also lead with science and research, and they use experts. So, you know, if you look at companies like United, Delta, et cetera, who are tasked with changing the flying experience moving forward, these guys are relying on experts to help them make these decisions. So people don't expect you to be an epidemiologist or a chief medical officer, but this is a great time to start to bring some of those experts into the fold in your business so you can rely on their level of expertise. They also test everything and then test it again and test it again and test it again. So if you do feel that you do have a health benefit that could be a part of your brand story, think about testing it and testing it with a certain level of expertise, and then thinking about how you tested it and communicating that clearly to your consumers as you move forward. Health brands are particularly risk averse. You know, risk aversion isn't something that I would ever like to impart on anyone, but I think it's really important right now that we think about how much risk we're putting into people's lives by the business decisions that we're making, or vice versa, how can we take risk away? So if we're a store owner, how can people come into our store and truly feel safe? And is there a way that we can help them in their health ambition? They also address very specific and detailed issues. So if you're a car manufacturer, what about your fabrics? What about your filters? We need to be thinking about all of those things. And then lastly, you know, in the era of social media, just a gentle reminder that there's no hiding away from these things. So as we've seen, you know, where brands are getting held to task on how they're acting over the last several months, you know, I suspect that this will continue. So just be ready to be open and transparent with audiences, to share your story, but also to be held accountable, you know, if you do make mistakes, and be prepared to address them. So when we think about the future, just a few closing thoughts here. So can you rethink the physical elements of your brand or how people experience your company physically? If you're, say, a major fitness company, what is that physical experience going to look like? And then this is kind of a related topic, but what is your digital and e-commerce strategy? And has it traditionally been an afterthought? We've talked to probably 200 or 300 companies over the last few months who have always thought of their e-commerce as kind of a supplement to what their physical business was. And this has changed dramatically and will change dramatically moving forward. What is your health proposition to your customer and your community? And how can you help them in their health and wellness ambition and make sure they feel reassured and protected? And do you have maybe a health story around your business or what you offer that you haven't tapped into yet? And then lastly, how are you speaking to your consumers and are you meeting them on their level? So we've seen some backlash over the last little while with people being overly commercial or seemingly opportunistic. People are worried right now, but they're also living in a time of change priorities. They're prioritizing cooking with their families, spending time with their children, taking care of their bodies. So just think about that as you're communicating with your community right now. So there's some really cool opportunities. Just in closing, I wanted to share a couple of examples that might offer some inspiration. So retail brands are actually hiring epidemiologists to help them figure out how their store experience can help mitigate risk for people as they're coming into their stores, and how can people feel safer as they shop and not be distracted by these ideas. Sports teams are hiring chief medical officers, and these people are responsible for making sure that the safety and well-being of their fan communities are intact. Major companies, and I don't want to breach confidentiality here, but the biggest companies that you can think of are all shifting their operating models. So several of them are thinking about remote models moving forward, permanent remote models. They're really rethinking their real estate footprint. They're really rethinking how they're treating their staff and how humanely they're allowing their business practices to be for people to spend more time with their families, etc. Car brands, I talked a little bit about this, and clothing brands are looking at their filters, their fabrics. What does your physical product actually look like? And this is really interesting. Nurses, doctors, etc. are heroes right now. So can you align with them? Can you support them in any way? Can you bring them into the fold of your business? Virtual work is likely permanent, and if spaces aren't for desks, what are we using them for? Can you create an amenity space for your staff that's maybe a private fitness area so they feel safe and taking care of their bodies? What about meditation and mental wellness as people come in to the workplace again? Regional travel is likely to go up significantly as people have some apprehension in the short term, particularly for getting on airplanes. Is there a problem that your brand can solve in this new paradigm? Andrew is an incredible example of a very pragmatic, simple issue that he addressed. And you probably have a solution that you can offer that you maybe haven't thought of in the past. And then, do you need to really rethink your business model? That's the thing that I would leave everybody with, is the idea of this, play, pause, play, has really been thrown out the window. People are so willing to break the rules right now. They're so willing to partner with one another. So if this leaves you with any inspiration, we are in a history-making time. And I just encourage all of you guys to treat your company as a health brand, treat your story as a health story, and let's make history together.
Thank you, Megan. This is great. We've been embracing this idea. We talk about build back better, in this idea of what we could do better than we've ever done before, and this idea of infusing wellness and intention into the way that we work, how we work, the way we build our products, and all those things to well-being is a really huge opportunity and give us a lot to think about. So thank you for that. So I'll turn it over to Afdel and Laura.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bobby and Megan. Megan, I know you need to drop off at some point, so we'll say thank you now in case you need to peace out. But let's turn our attention to Laura. Hi, Laura. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Of course, we are huge fans of Purpose, the consultancy that you work for. I want to give a shout out to Jeremy Hymans, who wrote the
Yep.
book New Power, who is one of the founders of Purpose. It's required reading at Conspiracy of Love headquarters. Highly recommend it. Laura, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up at Purpose and what Purpose is all about, please.
Yeah, sure. I started my life in advertising, a bunch of agencies, spent a long time at Wieden Kennedy, moved into corporate sustainability, and then landed at Purpose, where we build movements for a more open, just, and habitable world. So I cover this in the first couple of slides, so I don't want to bore everyone by doing it twice.
Let's dive in.
Yeah,
Let's jump
sure.
in. There's so much interesting stuff, and then we'll chat on the way out. But go for it. Don't forget
Awesome.
again, please keep sending us your questions via the chat or Q&A functions at the bottom there. And the last 15 minutes of this webinar, we're going to be answering them as well.
Great.
Over
Just
to
gonna
you,
check
Laura.
You can see my screen okay?
Yes, we can. Go for it.
Fantastic. Okay, well, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about why your purpose matters more than ever, your brand purpose, which, considering we're called Purpose, sounds like something we would say. But we've been having a lot of conversations recently, and a lot of the challenges that we've seen our corporate clients facing is we've been in this kind of, we've done rapid response, we've pivoted, we've done what we can do right now. When is the moment where we can start talking about all the other stuff that we cared about, like in February, like women's rights and human rights and the climate? Like, when do we kind of transition into that? And we've been sort of working with our clients on, like, how do you kind of wrap your head around that in a post-COVID world? And how do you start talking about stuff that don't feel like they're COVID related in a way that actually is relevant? So that's what I wanted to talk about a bit today. As promised, I'm going to give a little bit of context of Purpose, because I think it's important to know where our voice comes from and to know why we're saying some of these things. So as I said, a lot of our work revolves around supporting movements. We were founded by Jeremy, as you just mentioned, and most of our kind of staff are kind of organizers, activists, and campaigners. We work on lots of kind of crazy projects sometimes. We worked with Everytown for Gun Safety. We brought that campaign to life. We created Team Refugees, which you might remember, which was the kind of refugee campaign around the Olympics. We've brought Indigenous communities together to fight climate change. And next week we're launching Verified, which is the UN's anti-misinformation campaign. That's going to be a big global push next week. So we do a lot of work that's really deeply embedded in communities and in social change. But we also work with some of the world's biggest companies. And what we bring to those companies is our kind of authentic understanding of what creates movement in the world, what creates change, and how you drive participation in the causes and the issues that you really care about. And it's been an equally interesting transition for us to start working with companies like Unilever, like Viacom, like LinkedIn, like IKEA, to try and see how do our learnings fit with their learnings. So in the kind of in the immediate moment of COVID-19, we've seen lots of brands taking action, variable things, some amazing, some less than amazing, all kinds of things. Great that everyone's doing everything. We've seen loads of rankings of that. We've even seen some spoof ads that I'm sure everyone's seen that are mildly entertaining. I'm not going to kind of dwell on that. We know that consumers are kind of looking for brands to act in this moment, and that, of course, people want brands to be useful. The question I would ask is, like, why haven't we always been this useful? And we have also done a lot of rapid response campaigns. Like I said, we've got all this content online that you feel free to look at our website about how to respond from different aspects and for different types of organizations. But where we're kind of thinking now, and you touched on this, is moving from the rapid response that we've all been wrapped up in and rightly kind of trying to get our heads around what all that means, into a slightly more thoughtful approach to what reshape and rebuild looks like. And I love what you just said, Bobby, about Build Back Better. That's it. That's what I'm going to be talking about. And we're now speaking to our clients about, okay, what does the next 6, 12, 24 months look like? What does a brand do at this moment in time? The big question for me, I love this phrase, we're all waves of the same sea. It was sent, you've probably heard it, it was sent on, I think, on some like PPE equipment from China to Italy with a note on the side that said this. And like, I mean, that touched me. I'm sure it touched a lot of other people. the question I'm kind of asking is what happens when the tide goes out, right? Like we're in this moment, what happens when we all have to go back to business and figure out what happens next? So the one thing that COVID has done for the world, which I think it's shocking, it's been upsetting, it's been challenging, but it's also kind of opened up a bit of an opportunity. Because what COVID's really done is it's a health pandemic, but what it's also done is it's shone a light on kind of all these existing cracks in society, right? All the existing issues that were there. It's amplified them, it's blown them up, and it's put them right in our face. I mean, we just literally talked about healthcare, but the inadequacies and inequities in healthcare provision around the world. We've got these kind of vulnerable and precarious gig workers who don't have the kind of labor protections that they need, and are kind of being celebrated as frontline workers, but at the same time, like, they don't really have a choice, right? They're stitching together an income out of 3 different jobs. So there's we've got, I won't dwell too much on that, you can read it there, but I think all of these issues have started to bubble to the surface in a really interesting way. And I saw this in the New York Times editorial board, the most New York Times thing I've read for a long time, but I love this observation that crises expose problems, but they don't supply alternatives. What we need to do is fill that gap with ideas and leadership that lead to something better and that build back better. So our challenge to kind of our clients has been, well, how do we do that? How do we make sure that now these problems are front and center, that we are part of the solution? And what does it mean for a brand to kind of continue to be in this sort of post-COVID, post-pandemic environment, to continue to be useful, to be additive, to be equitable, and to be accountable for its actions? So the challenge kind of that we're saying is, yeah, of course, we want to make sure our brands stay relevant in the new normal. We need to catch on to all these trends. We need to shift our models online and everything else. But the bigger question that we really want to pose to our clients is, how can the power of your brand empower your customers to remake the world in a better way? And that's the kind of twist that we put on it. And that's where participation comes in. And that's where everything, the values that a brand has, come to life. So I'm going to talk briefly about how we think about purpose and how we've applied that in the kind of COVID context. So to put it in context of us, we have what we call a movement methodology. It's kind of how we work with all organizations, not just brands. We use the same model for everyone, whether it's Gates Foundation or IKEA. And purpose is the kind of first pillar in that movement methodology. And when we talk about purpose, we talk about what role does your organization, brand, or campaign play in the world? And we break it down into these 4 roles pretty much. Like, nothing is sadly as linear as a chart in real life, but these are the 4 areas that we tend to split it up into. So we've got changing perception, influencing behavior, shaping policy, and building systems. And then we go a little bit deeper than that, because we, as Afdhel mentioned, we like to talk about old power and new power quite a lot. So we break this down into what are the old power ways of doing that, the kind of top-down approaches to doing these 4 types of change. So it's kind of being like having a big elite voice in the world, being a convener that can bring people together, advocacy and lobbying for change, and kind of building new systems. We also look at it from the other side and we go, oh, sorry, what's the new power way of doing that? What's the bottom-up way of approaching these different types of change in the world? How does your purpose come to life in a way that is truly participatory, that's kind of sharing and allowing people to share their stories, that's motivating people to change behavior themselves, that's mobilizing a shift that then creates the environment where policy change can happen? And how do you kind of build platforms that enable other people to find the right kind of systemic solutions that they're looking for? And we always say neither of these is better or worse. They have different roles in the world. What we do find is that our clients tend to be much better at the top-down stuff, because that's muscle memory. What we try to do is help them to do more of the bottom-up stuff at the same time. So when we speak to our clients, when we've been talking about kind of what do we do now, right? We know our role in the world, and I'll come on to an example. What do we do now? Our answer is kind of being, do what you've been doing, like double down, because our clients, I've kind of broken up some of the issue spaces that are all of our clients tend to work across, including our corporate clients. And when we start looking at that and analyzing, you kind of go, well, COVID-19 is, and the fallout from that, what's going to happen next, is going to impact all of these issues. It's going to create new pertinent moments inside all of these issues. So you don't need to kind of pivot towards COVID. You just need to do what you've been doing, do it better, and find the moments and your role in a post-COVID world. So whatever it is that you care about, there is a moment where you can step in. I mean, we were just talking before this call, right, about the refugee crisis, suspension of resettlement. That's going to be massive when we get back into, just as an example. So we've sort of put together this very simple sort of way of kind of talking our clients through how do you find a new focus, a new important for your purpose or your kind of mission in this world. And what we've kind of just a very simple framework of let's start with what your brand purpose and role is. That's always the start point. Excuse me. Let's look at the new context that we're going to be living in. Let's look at the new needs that brings to light. And then let's kind of look at what's the new imperative in the middle of that and how can you be additive in that role. So one example, we're working with a media company right now who is, we were already on this track. This was really important to them in the US with the election coming. How do they use the power of their brands and the talents within their network to uplift marginalized and unheard voices and to normalize voting amongst communities who don't normally vote, to kind of make sure that democracy works for all of us, obviously on the premise that if everyone's voices are not in the mix, democracy isn't representative for everyone. So that's where we were. COVID happened, all blew up, no one knew what to do. We're like, how do we talk about the election? And what we've been working through with them is kind of going, well, the election's coming, it's really important. Civic engagement has never been more important, but the context has changed a little bit, right? So one thing that's really important now is that voting is likely to kind of, in America, I'm talking mainly about with the 2020 election coming up, the systems are going to change. We're going to be looking at things like early voting day. We're going to be looking at voting by mail. People are going to be making this weird trade-off between, I want to protect my health, but I also want to exercise my right to vote. Which should I choose? And like, there's a whole new context and decision-making process in there, which means there's this need for not just kind of doing the work that they were doing before, which is about making sure people's voices are heard and normalizing voting, but really like hard information, education and support, right? And making sure this imperative that those communities that were already marginalized and least likely to vote get even more locked out of the system. So making sure that they're empowered and informed and enabled to actually cast that vote. So where we kind of got to on that is that kind of this slightly new focus of not just using the power of their brands and talent to kind of raise up voices, but actually get a bit more down and dirty with like making sure that there's information, making sure that we have a voting system. We're talking about a kind of app that you can use or a place you can go that will tell you, right, which state are you in, which constituency, where do you vote, how do you register, what are the 3 steps, checklist this, that really actually guide people on the journey. So if I go back to kind of how we were looking at their role before, we were looking at them as like this big voice in the world because there's a big media company, like they've got a voice. And we were looking at them as kind of motivators to get citizens to kind of change the way that they think about voting. Where we are now is we've added a couple more to this. And I think like this programmer piece is becoming really interesting, like I said, of like, how do you actually create systems that enable people to navigate the complexity of trying to vote by mail and everything else. And how do we really kind of mobilize people to get each other to vote? So get your grandmother to vote, get anyone else to vote. So that's kind of an example of how we've sort of started to shift people to thinking about this is not a pivot towards COVID. This is a renewed, sorry, I'm going to drink some water. This is a renewed emphasis on what you were doing before in a new context. And probably over time, I'm not quite sure.
Take your time. Keep going. This is gold. Okay. Keep going.
Oh, great. Well, this is the end. So that's good. But yeah, just to kind of summarize, the fallout from COVID is just going to continue to amplify issues. The economic fallout is going to be enormous, and that's going to show a lot of cracks within a lot of inequality, a lot of financial issues, a lot of inability for people to get the kind of support and help that they need. In that context, your purpose matters more than it's ever mattered before, and you need to really hone in on what that is. look for that intersectionality between what you stand for generally in the world and the moments and the places where that becomes even more important, and find out, for me, it's all about how do you be even more additive and useful than you've ever been as a brand. And that's a tough question. And Megan kind of said, it does require like rethinking your business model and rethinking like the way that you create value and the way that you share value. And it's tough. Like, this isn't like we just do it and it's done. It's going to be hard. And then really critically, to bring value back to the brand, empower your consumers to be active participants in that, because by enabling them to change the world themselves through your brand, that creates a really tight connection between you and enables you to deliver on your mission, but also enables them to deliver on their personal sense of purpose as well. And that's kind of all from me today.
Thank you, Laura.
But yeah, happy to answer questions or anything else.
Yes, we've got a bunch coming in on the chat function. We're going to get to them at the end. Drink a glass of water and stop coughing. I feel like you're about to die.
I'm pretty sure this cough has just started in the last half an hour, everyone. Don't worry about my health. I think it's a nervous cough.
Please don't die at our webinar. You're far too valuable.
I'm gonna do my best.
To the world.
Okay.
That was really fascinating stuff. As a purpose geek myself, I always love seeing how the best of the best do it. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
We'll have more questions coming up. All right. So now we're going to go from theory to practice. We're going to talk to somebody who's had a fascinating journey. Welcome, Andrew. How are you?
Good. Fantastic. This crisis has put all of us in sort of sometimes tough positions, awkward positions, new positions. And for our company, as well as many of the companies I think here, we've had to adjust and change and innovate.
Yep.
In response to a lot of the challenges that we've seen.
Yeah.
And just by nature of changing processes and changing how you're doing things, you become a lot busier.
Yeah.
And so the past 3 months for us has been a lot less, going through security at airports and taking my shoe and belt off, and a lot more conference calls and video calls.
Yeah.
Just thinking about how we can change to this new environment. And I think to echo a lot of the thoughts that have already been, said on this webinar, even when the genius comes up with that vaccine that's going to help, save millions of lives, things are going to definitely change after this.
Yeah.
And I think it really, in tough situations, humans are forced to think about the most pragmatic solutions. And, before it's easy to, just say, oh, let's keep things the way it is. But when you're in really those tough situations, it forces you into survival mode.
Yeah.
And sometimes not literally survival mode, but that sort of survival mode mentality, where you're finding the best solution, the most practical solution.
Well, let's talk about the best and practical solution that you created. Just to give everybody some context here,
Sure.
You are the founder and CEO of Voice, which does live on-demand translation in 220 languages. It's an app where anybody can pick up the phone, pick a language, and they're immediately connected to somebody who speaks the language they desire. Just to explain to people what it looks like, we're going to do a live demo here because you did this before we started this webinar. It blew our minds.
Sure.
Somebody pick a language. Go on, anyone in the panel. Megan, Laura, pick a language.
Does anyone remember their high schools? Did anyone take Spanish?
Hindi.
What? Hindi?
Yeah.
I like Hindi. All right. Challenge accepted, Andrew. Let's see if you can find a Hindi language speaker on Voice without destroying your phone. All right. So connect with language interpret. Walk us through what you're doing.
So here's the Voice app. You basically look for a language that the person needs, and typically we cover 235 different languages. In the US, as you guys know, the most popular ones are Spanish and Arabic, Chinese, and so on and so forth. And so you just pick a language and whatever that person's speaking, and then you type it in and you hit connect. So I'll hit Hindi on my device, and it's like Uber. So it's basically, you're looking for a driver. In this case, you're looking for an interpreter. It's going to search our network and find someone who speaks the language, and then we'll locate them, and they'll come up on and begin translating for us. So not sure if anyone speaks Hindi.
We could enough to get by. Let's take a look. Is it connecting?
Yeah, I think shukriya is thank you in Hindi.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretty sure.
Always do namaste. All right.
2 words.
It's ringing. The tension is unbearable.
Hi, this is Amos Srestha. I'll be your Hindi interpreter. ID number 1086777. How may I help you?
Hi, I'm just doing a demonstration of the voice app. I want to say thank you in Hindi.
Sir?
I want to say thank you in Hindi.
Show us the screen.
Dhanyabad.
Dhanabad?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Can we show people who's on screen, the what it looks like?
Yeah, let me. I
Yeah.
ended the comment.
Oh, don't worry, it's okay. So that's incredible that you can call up pretty much any language that we picked at random, and you can get connected to somebody. And you develop this platform for use specifically with hospitals, and also for legal cases where the lack of interpreters is a problem. There aren't physical interpreters; they just can't be interpreters in every single language in every single place. So you solve this problem by having on-demand interpretation. And how many calls did you guys do last year, by the way?
We did about 1 million calls last year. So basically covering, anything from sign language, Hindi, Spanish, Arabic, working primarily in the healthcare space, working with hospitals and pharmacies and so on and so forth. The goal is having a translator there to communicate when you need it. And, there's about close to 30 million people in the US alone who don't speak English perfectly or that well. And so it's definitely a big challenge. And, especially when you're talking about your healthcare situation, very personal and complex healthcare needs, it's a lot easier to talk in your native tongue. And I'll just quickly show my Hindi. I know you guys didn't see the video screen, but I'll quickly share the Hindi interpreter.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, sir.
Good. We don't have anyone here who speaks Hindi, but I wanted to show the video screen so everyone can at least see the video of the translator.
Okay, sir.
But I wanted to pretend as if there was a patient who was speaking Hindi, and I want to speak to them.
Okay, sir.
How long have you been having the fever? Has it been 102 degrees for a while, or how long have you been experiencing the fever?
Ji, namaskar. Is the patient on?
No, there's no patient, just demonstrating the app.
Okay, sir. So, shall I interpret your voice right now?
Go ahead.
Sir, let me translate for you. तो आपको कब से बुखार है, मतलब आपको 104.2 डिग्री का बुखार कब से है?
And are you currently taking any medication?
क्या आप अभी कुछ मेडिसिन ले रहे हैं?
Perfect. Thank you so much. So everyone can see the video screen here.
Yeah. Great job. Thank you.
Calling, sir.
Thank you.
Take care.
That's amazing.
For using
And-
our service. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
And, and so these are all paid employees of Voice, right? Talk us through how you
So they're-
recruit the
it's-
interpreters.
It's very much an on-demand marketplace model where we have on-demand. They're all independent contractors.
Mhm.
Some of them work full days, or spend most of their time working with us. But they're able to do whatever job they would like.
Mhm.
A lot of them are mothers who had kids and are not fully in the workforce. And they are looking for opportunities, and they come to us, and we allow them to work from home and work on their own hours and be their own boss. And so it's very much the on-demand sort of marketplace economy. And we find the best folks possible in the US and around the world who understand healthcare, understand medical terminologies, HIPAA compliance, patient confidentiality, and not just understand how to translate, but understand that it's a service, and patients are often in tough situations in hospitals. Unless you're having a child, there's often not that many good reasons to go to the emergency room. It's not the place we're all hanging out on Friday nights with our friends. So it's a challenging environment. It's a stressful environment, and these interpreters make patients feel comfortable speaking their own language. And often they're from the same places these patients come from,
Mm.
whether they're in India or Afghanistan or Romania or Poland or Russia, all these different countries, and they have that sense of connection and relation.
Mm.
And again, when you're in those type of challenging environments, it really helps to have someone who understands you.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's not going to solve your disease or your symptoms, but it'll make you at least mentally feel a little bit better.
100%. And that's why you guys decided to go ahead and donate 100,000 minutes of free interpretation to any hospitals on the front line. How's that going? What's been the take up? Where are the hospitals that are using it at the moment?
Yeah, so we signed up a hospital. It's called Cooper Hospital in New Jersey. That's looking. We're going to waive 50,000 minutes for them. So it's super exciting, and we're in talks with a number of other hospitals, just formalizing those partnerships to waive the minutes for them, and going through the procurement and legal processes with those organizations.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's our tool is really helping during this crisis because there's a lot of patients who don't speak English who have gotten the virus, particularly in the Latino communities, and so we've seen continued utilization of the services. We also developed a virtual health feature in our application during this crisis when there were a lot of patients at home who couldn't go to the doctor or they couldn't go to the hospital because of all the restrictions. And so now we allow that doctor. If I was the doctor, and I'm not a doctor, I think everyone can tell I'm not. But if I were a doctor, I could have gotten the interpreter, and he could have dialed out via audio or via video to the patient who's at home to have telehealth.
Mm.
And so we developed that feature literally not overnight, but within about 3-4 weeks when the virus pandemic began, because we thought about it and we realized, hey, folks aren't going to be going to the hospitals as much. A lot of elective procedures are being canceled. They're going to be at home, but they're still going to have the same issues, right?
Mm.
They don't go away just because they're not, the procedures get canceled as
Yeah.
much as they wish they did.
Yeah.
So we developed this telehealth feature. And as far as I'm aware, I've not seen any sort of major telehealth companies have that sort of nifty solution. It's easy to do, not easy, but it's easier to do telehealth for English speaking people.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to do telehealth for Hindi speaking or Burmese speakers or Kinyarwandan or Swahili and you name that language. It's difficult.
Mhm.
And with our solution, it's really, you guys see how it works. It's really simple. And talking about how brands can help to fight this virus, that's how we're helping. Is
Mm.
in one way is developing that solution to allow patients to remain at home and get the same access to healthcare as all the folks in this call who speak English.
Amazing. I'm going to turn it over to Bobby for some questions because they're coming in fast, but I want to just segue into that question with the last question I have for you. I know your story. First of all, how old are you, Andrew?
I'm 26.
You're 26. You're
Call me a grandpa.
you're disgustingly doing so much good at 26, way more than I ever did at 26. So kudos to that. But before we turn to Bobby, I know the story of where you came up with this idea. It's when you were going door to door, right? Tell us a little bit about that moment, and then Bobby, jump in.
Sure. And it's a story about how your education can really pay off. And I was taking a class. I was living in Montreal. I'm not sure if you guys have been to Canada or Montreal, but it's an amazing city. I was taking a course there at McGill University in 2016. And it was a business course on how businesses can help create social impact and real social impact, tangible social impact. And so during that time, there was a massive refugee crisis from Syria. I'm sure you guys remember all the videos. And, I think there was a child who was dead on the beach that the whole world saw and was just in shock. And it was a really bad situation. And my grandparents were refugees during the Holocaust and World War II. And so I've always had a heart for the challenges they go through. And so, I started volunteering and just kind of going door to door. And I remember the sweltering heat of the summer and just, bringing cookies, helping them, talk about going to community events, going to see their healthcare providers, taking the bus. The challenge with all my good intentions and, trying to do my part, I didn't speak fluent Arabic. I know the letters, the alphabet and a couple words, but not enough to build trust and be really helpful. And so unless you have someone there who speaks that dialect of Arabic, like a volunteer in person, it's super challenging. And if you don't speak English, or in Montreal, if you don't speak English or French, it's really hard to navigate the city, go to see your doctor, and so on and so forth. It's actually debilitating. And so from that massive sort of pain point I saw, and just, meeting those people firsthand, really nice people, grandparents, people just like us who just want a good quality of life, have nice food and have a good time and just enjoy life. To not have that, it hurts. And so I really got me passionate about solving this problem and doing it on a massive scale.
Mm.
And so that's kind of what drove me
Amazing.
through all the, it's not easy, in startups, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And, some of it's just luck, having a really good team and solving the right problem at the right time. But we've been very lucky to be able to produce this solution. And as I mentioned, over 1 million calls last year. We want to double this year. At the end of the day, I want to do hundreds of millions of calls because it's a big problem. It happens every day. It's not going away anytime soon. So that's kind of the story.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Andrew. Bobby, over to you to jump in with the questions.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. And the question that Aftel asked came from Richard Allen. So, Richard, thanks for that question. Laura, I have a question for you. Really interested in this desire of consumers, particularly young people, to be actively involved in brand actions to drive change. So this idea of empowering people to actually be of service to others. In your work that you've been doing at Purpose, have you seen a brand that you think has done it really well in terms of activating people? I know so much of Purpose background is in mobilization and so forth. Curious if you have an example of someone that you think is doing it right.
Yeah, great question. Putting me on the spot. I think, let me have a think about this. Yeah. Oh, you're really asking me. Hang on, give me a second. I'm going to come back to you with one because I don't just want to give you one of our clients and sound like we're advertising ourselves. That would be not cool. I think what we've seen, I think they stretch on a range, right? Obviously you've got your Patagonias. They're ridiculous. They're so good, but they're founded on they're founded on these values that are like absolutely inherent to them. So when they get people to do stuff, it feels completely authentic. I think what I love about like the way a brand like that works is how they don't just do that. They live the values. So they always do what they're asking other people to do. They close their stores on voting days. They close their stores on Black Friday. They donate all of their profits. So I think like what they bring to it is absolute credibility. I love Ben & Jerry's. I think they do a really, really nice job. And I think what's really interesting about Ben & Jerry's is how they don't just, it's not as intrinsically obvious as it is with Patagonia, right? Patagonia is growing from the outdoors. They care about the outdoors. They want to do stuff that protects the outdoors. What I like about Ben & Jerry's is how they just got all in on something like refugees. And they have a really good, it's wrapped up in their product. It's every touch point on how they operate. And they have really, really credible stuff online that I think speaks in their brand character. And I think that's one thing that we really do understand in terms of the challenge for brands, is that one of the problems we see with a client I won't name, but some of their brands really struggle to get this link between the brand character and the brand voice and the change they're trying to create, right? You're not a nonprofit and somehow it's got to connect back. And I think Ben & Jerry's just has that like really sweet spot of understanding how to talk about refugees in the voice of Ben & Jerry's.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a really nice example of how to do it really well.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that.
Nice.
These are great examples. Andrew, we have a couple of questions for you as well. First question from Joyce Cohen. How are the interpreters paid for their time that are on your platform and for their knowledge? And what's the price of the telehealth multi-language help that you provide?
Anyway, nice to meet you, Joyce. Thanks for the question. We pay our workforce usually hourly. So we'll negotiate an hourly wage with each individual interpreter. And many of these folks are in the US and Canada and international. So it just depends on what their location is and sort of what their request is in terms of wages. And then we just finalize an hourly wage. There are some rare languages that we don't get as many requests for. Just to name a couple, Yiddish is an example. Wolof from North Africa, Berber from North Africa as examples of just, language we don't get as many requests every day. And so obviously we don't pay those folks on an hourly wage. We'll pay them on a sort of when a sort of ad hoc per use basis. When we do need them, we'll pay them for their services that they do provide. So that's kind of the two ways that we pay the workforce, and we obviously want to pay them as fair wages as possible for their knowledge and skill set, because it's a very professional service, and they're also providing services often in very delicate and complex environments. And so you have to be intelligent and qualified and sensitive to the needs of that patient or person who's struggling to speak English and needs some support. So that's kind of how we pay folks. In terms of what we charge, we typically charge about 99 cents per minute of use for the service. Typically folks will use it for about 9 minutes for a consultation in a clinic or a hospital. So it ends up being about $9. It's very affordable. We don't have any sort of like hidden charges or gotcha fees. It's just pay per use. When you need it, you pay. When you don't really pay us. And it's been a very flexible model for hospitals. And typically hospitals will pay either full-time employees or part-time employees, or they'll hire local agencies to send people to drive to the hospital in person. Or there's some telephonic or other solutions out there. But this solution, it's really quick, it's accessible, it's affordable, and we're both empowering the patients who don't speak English, but we're also empowering these interpreters. As I mentioned, many of them are working mothers who are able to make extra income. So we're empowering their lives as well. So it's not just a one-sided sort of impact. It's really two-sided on both the interpreter side as well as the patient or the person who doesn't speak the language. So hopefully that answers your question.
That's great. And how do you protect the privacy and confidentiality using health data?
Sure. So none of the calls are recorded. With the calls not being recorded, there's no sort of patient health information. There's no trail, so to speak. So there's no way these hackers can hack the calls and get the recordings, because we don't record. The calls are all encrypted from point to point. So from one device to the other device on the interpreter side, as well as the provider side, all encrypted. We use cloud-based servers. They're fully redundant and secure. And our interpreters, they're all professional medical interpreters. They're under non-disclosure, non-confidentiality agreements. They go through HIPAA certification and testing once per year, annually. And we've established an online interpreter education program, which offers courses for them to take every month, which helps them just work on their skills, improve their skills, and confidentiality is a part of the educational programs that we offer to our interpreters.
Great. And I'm assuming that the shared vision and values is a key part of what you're looking for as well, in terms of when you're hiring and bringing the interpreters and others into the organization.
Yeah, I think it's, when you're running a business, and the analogy is kind of when you're rowing a boat, everyone has to row in the same direction. Otherwise the boat starts to sort of spin and you get stuck. And so it's not just about, oh, I speak 2 languages and I can interpret. This company was really started on the vision of helping people. And so that's the number one important thing and that's how you produce value, is when you can help people and do the right thing. And it's super simple concept. And so we always are looking for, whether it's interpreters, hospitals, or even our clients, we look for clients who care, that really are doing things good in their communities. And the employees of the business, our investors, our shareholders, we look for good folks, and that helps us all row in the same direction. And that's kind of led to the success of the organization.
All right, great. And one last question for the two of you. What is one thing just in your work right now that you're seeing and all the things that you're doing that's really giving you hope right now in terms of what the future is going to hold as we get through this period and get to the other side? What's one thing that is giving you hope in this moment?
I can go. One thing that I'm really loving is the amount of collaboration we're seeing between business leaders, and the openness to kind of talk to each other and share advice and share knowledge. I feel like a crisis makes people, no one knew what they were doing, right? And everyone started talking to each other, and we're putting together some leadership conversations and stuff, and we're seeing like CEOs are willing to sit around the table with other CEOs and go, yeah, what do you think? Like, what are we supposed to do? What's the future of like the purpose? What are we doing about capitalism? So that's making me feel kind of really good that it sparked that moment of open conversation.
Yeah, that's really nice, Laura. I got a text about a week ago on WhatsApp from one of my interpreters, and he wrote a really nice note to me. He said, I love working with voice, but during this pandemic, I want to do more. Would you mind if I could volunteer for you on Fridays to volunteer as an interpreter and not be paid? And he's one of many who have sort of asked to volunteer, and what else can they do from our company, but also from the provider side and hospitals that have nothing to do with our company or translation. But we've seen nurses and doctors give up everything, their homes, their families, their relationships, to be in the hospital 10, 15, 20 hours a day and fulfill their core mission as a doctor. And I think the beautiful thing about this pandemic is it shows how strong we are as humans, how capable we are, and how much we care, and how big our hearts are. So I think, and hopefully we don't have to illustrate that every day, because it's certainly trying times, but it does show how strong as a species we are and what we're capable. And so I think it provides a lot of hope that we really can defeat anything that gets in our way. And definitely inspires me to put in extra hours and work on the weekends and do whatever I can. But I think all of us are capable of more than we even think. So that's what's kind of keeping me inspired and giving me hope.
Well said. And I'll thank you both. And I'll turn it over to Afto to close this out.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. There's such an inspiration an hour that you spent with us. I want to say thank you to Megan Rokosh, who had to jump off, Laura Quinn from Purpose, Andrew Royce from Voice. Thank you, guys, for doing the work that you're doing and coming and sharing your knowledge and insights with us here. This is going to be the final webinar for a while. We're going to take a break for a couple of weeks just to reset, reboot, refresh, and come back better than before. All of the talks you've heard over the last 7 weeks are up on our YouTube channel, and we will also promote them on all of our social media channels. So in case you missed any of it, that's all going to be up there for everybody to see as well. Stay in touch with us via LinkedIn and Twitter and all the places you can find Conspiracy of Love and Good is the New Cool. In the meantime, all that remains for me to say is to say, stay safe, be well wherever you are, and don't forget to look after each other. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy your weekends, and we'll be back soon. Same bat time, same bat channel. Bye for now.
Thank you.